making lemons in a lemonade. Foreign aid, gotta make sure the cardios get paid. Everybody now, foreign, we need the oil bay. Foreign aid, we need the oil bay.
Oh, where's the oil? The oil field shut down. Oh, hey everybody. Singing those closed oil field blues. Those they went and nationalized their oil field blues. You may have been putting some context clues together so far, but this is going to be a very special episode. There was some borderline racist music to kick us off. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm wearing a shirt that, I don't know, when I looked at my closet, I said, that one seems like it has the most Latin flair. Because today we're going south. We're going south of the border, south of a few borders, south of the equator even, to a whole nother hemisphere. Going to a very special place, a place that is actually kind of special in my heart. I have, over the past few years, gotten pretty close to some people, well, one person from Venezuela who is well connected and has a lot of stories and has a very interesting story about Venezuela and where she came from. And she's been here a while, so before you guys go and get your pitchforks and try anything like that, she's been here a while, legal, married, super cool, and loves America. And that's what the hardest part about this was, because all right, what's in the news right now? What's this biggest thing going down? It's this USAID thing. People want to say USAID, and I even often say USAID. I might fuck up and say it a couple times during this podcast, but it has nothing to do with aid, and that's the trick. That's their little mind control trick they're trying to get people to conflate these two things, this USAID program with USAID. We want to connect all this money that's being spent and funneled through bureaucrats and sometimes ends up in places it shouldn't be. We want to conflate that with kids in other countries going hungry and having the bloated bellies and starving and the flies and all that jazz. They want us to conflate those two things, but is that really what's going on here? Is it? So the reason you tune in to my show every week is because not only am I going to try my very best to tell you the truth in a way that almost embarrasses me to say, but I'm going to entertain you. And why trust me? Well, I'm probably not full of the best ideas, but I think I've got a good method of spreading awareness over different things and at least trying to wrap my head around something so we can go on that journey together. Can we not? I'm not saying you got to believe everything I say, but I'm going to try to make a compelling case in an entertaining way that's going to keep you here. Because let's face it, a lot of this stuff is so arcane and silly, and it probably would take, 24 hours of hard research, really just behind the computer, listening to stuff, reading books, reading articles, 24 hours of hard research to really kind of wrap your head around what the USAID has done in just one country. And this week it's going to be Venezuela. So, since I love you so much, I'm going to save you that. You can come along this little journey with me, and we can talk about what's been going on in the land of cacao, in the land of coffee, in the land of oil, the black gold. The black gold. But this is a predicament I'm in, and I am aware that a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is very dark and dismal, and for whatever reason, I like looking into the void and looking into those things and staring it down, and that's it's not always the most fun. It's not always the most uplifting thing to hear, so if it needs to be told and it needs to be heard, but no one's going to give a shit if it's not kind of fun, then let's make it fun. Let's turn toppling other governments into sort of like a, state fair. Let's add a carousel in it. Let's a little tilt-a-whirl kind of thing. Why not? I don't know. The world sucks. You can laugh or you can cry about it. I heard that somewhere. I don't know who said that, but it sticks with me. All right. So what is the USAID? Well, you probably heard this, but let's just go through the acronym. It is the United States Agency for International Development. It's this power body that came about after World War II, mostly, and sort of in the part of the 50s in which the CIA was getting caught toppling and overthrowing and destabilizing, running their little coups. Coups is such a fun word for something so evil, isn't it? Coups, it's just a little coup. We just threw a little coup. Cuckoo, you know? It's a fun word. Fun word, but it's a French word, so you can't trust it because it ends with a P. But what is the USAID? International Development, but it also looks like aid. So if you know anything about the government, they'll label it one thing and it'll be completely different. The USAID, the fact that it just says aid, somebody got kind of clever and wanted this to sound really good, much better than it is. And they're depending on you to not dig too much into it. But over the past couple of weeks, it's just been coming out like somebody in the hood cracked a fire hydrant and they're playing on the slip and slide. They got the water guns out. The cops are kind of nervous about the water guns. You know, we're having a party out here with the hydration of information that's coming from this little tap in the street, the USAID. If there's a thesis statement on what it might be, I'm starting to believe that it's like a silent economic weapon that we developed because sending in commandos with guns started to look bad. That became a PR nightmare, and you can't have PR nightmares in the world of radio and papers, much less in the world of the internet. It's only gotten worse in terms of exposure and how hard it is to keep that PR in. So it's even more important that they lie to us, but the lies are starting to trickle out. And the list of hilarious things that we've been funding through the USAID is great. I'm just going to read you a couple. I don't want to read too much on this because it's kind of boring, but $1 million for an Iraqi Sesame Street. The Iraqi kids need Sesame. They need Big Bird. They need Elmo. They need these things. They got to learn their ABCs. And I mean, okay, if it was just $1 million for Iraqi Sesame Street, I might be like, okay, maybe there's a national defense angle there. Maybe if we can get them hooked on our propaganda, then they won't want to blow us up. Maybe, okay. But is that it? Is it just the million for, oh, no, it's not. It's, okay, there's the Ganja Project that the USAID funded. The Ganja Project, what is that? Oh, it was money to grow weed and poppy in Afghanistan to help the farmers. Okay, gotcha. All right, cool. Well, we needed that. $47,000 for a trans opera in Colombia. Okay. All right, a trans opera. I mean, yeah, that's fine. I'm wondering if, because they're trans, did they go from like soprano to, I don't know, which way does that go? Which way does that go in terms of vocal pitch? And then there's the $1.5 million for DEI in Serbia. Apparently, the Serbs are not very good at remaining diverse. I think there's just a couple kinds of people in Serbia. It's not a very big place. They might all look like Novak Djokovic. Okay, so DEI programs there, $1.5 million. All right. Bugs for breakfast programs in Africa, promoting bug-based protein for people that, okay. The list goes on, and it's a really, really strange list. A couple million here for some Moroccan pottery classes, a couple million here for trans surgeries in Peru, a comic book here in another country that's like has to do with something that's like, okay, And these are all the recent ones, and they all have something to do with like DEI and, you know, what the Biden administration and Obama were pushing for a long time is like, I think the new form of Marxism and social division was this DEI thing. And so it was really important to push it all over the world because they're soon going to collapse all the economies of the world and unite them under a one world sort of thing. And those DEI divisions are what's going to keeps us all at each other's throats and keeps us from, you know, uniting against something like that. At least it seems like that might be what the whole plan was. And the right's just running with it, of course. And it's kind of tacky, if I'm being honest, that all of the focus is going on like the money that we've spent on these DEI programs, because it really does go so much deeper than that. And USAID's been around a long time. So I kind of wanted to pick an example that was maybe a little less focused on all of the weird LGBT, DEI stuff that's been pushed. And what a weird thing to push on the rest of the world. I don't know. It's a weird thing, but it's not all of it. It's not the whole story. It's not the whole story at all. All right, well, this is kind of important to give us context for the story. So, the last time we had like a war that we really gained territory in and kept was the Spanish American War. And the Spanish were really full of themselves. They had built this empire, big trading empire, and it just wasn't very well run in the sense that they didn't really have an organized system of governance the same way the rest of Europe was sort of developing, especially when you are getting into like mercantile and super involved and complex trading empires. You kind of need something a little bit more flexible, versatile, adaptable than an oligarchy, and spreading out that oligarchy to like just people that are loyal and you trust, and usually military people. But that's sort of how the Spanish colonial empire is going, and they just historically do not treat their colonies very well at all, at all. Maybe even worse than some of the others, and the French or the British, or I mean, not saying any colonization is good, but there is a gradient of how bad of a colonist you can be. And the Spanish tended to be pretty shitty about it. And they didn't want to really let go of their colonies very easily. And so we fought this war with Spain in 1898. And that was the last time we really went at it and fucked somebody up and took their shit. And it all started because I think the USS Maine, which is one of our battleships at the time, was harbored in Havana, Cuba. And Spain is real sore about losing Cuba, and they're really worried about American influence, and we're getting to be a pretty, big country. This is pre-World War I, of course. We're not really the big boys we we would become, but we're still an expansive nation sort of at this point. And I mean, who knows what really happened because it's history, but the story goes that the USS Maine was destroyed and blown up, sabotaged in the harbor and sank, and everybody immediately blamed it on the Spanish. But also at the time, everybody in that area sort of had the reason to blame it on the Spanish. I'm not saying that the Spanish didn't do it. I'm not saying the US did it. All I'm saying is that if you're the US and you really want to kind of kick Spain out of these colonies and use them because they're closer to you and you want to build your empire, it's very convenient that the USS Maine blows up in Havana Harbor, because now you've got your instant casus belli, which means like your reasons to go to war. You've instantly got those reasons now. And we had, I mean, it wasn't like a hard thought. We whipped Spain's ass. I think we sent 2 boats into Manila in the Philippines and pretty much destroyed their whole fleet with maybe 1 or 2 boats. And I think this is the era in which you're seeing newly made ironclad boats fighting against old rickety ass wooden ships that the Spanish were fighting pirates with, and that era. But like the Jack Sparrow era, starting to meet something looks a little bit more like evil and steampunk and dark, and the people are just ruddy with coal dust and they're shooting cannons at you, and your cannons don't really do anything. It's one of those moments where people on those boats, despite how pretty the boats are and how flashy your uniforms are, you fucking going down. So we whipped Spain's ass in that war, took all their shit, meaning Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines, maybe Hawaii. I don't know. I don't know about Hawaii. Don't quote me on that. But we took some stuff from them, and in that war, weakened Spain to the point where we could kind of start to have hegemony and control over the South American hemisphere. It became our concern in a pretty big way. And I'm sure you could see why. But before World War I, which is like the 1911 era, I think is when it starts. Yeah, 1911. Right around then is when oil is found in Venezuela. But they declared their independence, or they declared their independence in 1811. They actually got it in 1820. And then so it's like another 100 years until they find oil there. And so for those first 100 years, Venezuela is a formerly colonized country that has no modern economy. at the time. The economy was based on like a plantation style slavery, you know, it was done by the hands of African slaves, but most of it was on cocoa and coffee and some other plantation style crops in the plains and the jungles there. And even before oil became a thing, Venezuela was still in a predicament because they're the new kids on the block. There are European settlers and indigenous people and African slaves all in the same country. And the country is ultimately freed and independence won by a man named Simon Bolivar, who was Spanish, half Italian, I think, or part Italian. He's very European looking, very tall, very handsome. And this is when I started to pick up on a trend in South America that I think the reason South America stays in such political turmoil is because they can only be liberated by a handsome, charismatic, relatively tall person. And those are, you know, kind of a one in a million sort of thing. Like Javier Milei is not necessarily all of those things, but he's enough of that to kind of, shake your fist at. Bukele, he's kind of handsome, you know? Simon Bolivar, handsome. People like Pancho Villa, pretty handsome. There was some hero military dude who stood up to Maduro recently and got blown up in his house. And the video went viral because he was like, you know, olivey skinned and bright blue eyes. You know, in South America, people worship beauty, and that's the way it should be. We've kind of lost that in the West. We give too much power to nerds here, which, you know, has its drawbacks, has its positives. But down there, people only respect beautiful people. And so it's hard for them to get a leader every now and then, because not only do they have to be like right and care about the people, but they also have to be hot. And it's hard for hot people to not become desensitized by the world because they get stuff so easy. Because people just want to like help you out and do shit for you. So those people, they got to like go through they have to go through like trials and tribulations, being handsome and tall in a world full of short, squatty, indigenous people, and they have to not judge those people and then still care about them. And then every now and then you get a Simon Bolivar who actually becomes like somebody who cares. He was a handsome, wealthy, rich, fairly tall dude, didn't have problems getting pussy, really did not need to quit what he was doing to free South America, but he did anyway, and that's why they respect him there. They don't let ugly people free them just because, I mean, ugly people generally don't have the best ideas, let's be honest. Not that pretty people only have good ideas, but like the good ideas come from like the 5s to 7s. You know, good ideas don't come out of 3s because they hate the world. And South America just realizes this. So, all right. So you've got this era in which they're making coffee, they're making cacao, they have a burgeoning economy, and it's pretty much solely based on foreign trade. So when all of your money is coming from foreign trade, you really don't have a lot of power and leverage, especially when those other countries are way bigger than you, and they've got giant consumer markets to consume your cocoa, to consume your coffee. And even before the oil, I'm seeing some history in which British merchants and money lenders sort of fuck things up a little bit, sort of stack the cards in their favor because they've got more leverage. And there's this culture that starts developing in Venezuela of the strong men, the caudillos meaning like a military leader, the strong man, that handsome dude that has to, those guys kind of develop this culture of like loyalty to each other. We call it clientelism, in which you get some power and some money, and to buy the loyalty and to secure your power, you sort of pay people off, and you share the goods with just enough people to keep everybody else in line. And it's usually military leaders who've got the loyalty of the army. And if you got the loyalty of the army, you can kind of keep everybody else in line, especially when everybody else has sticks and stones and bows and arrows, and you're the only people around with muskets and I guess would be cartridge rifles later. But so even before oil, Venezuela is very unstable because they're a burgeoning colonial power, because there's different ethnic groups there, meaning there's European settlers of a few different varieties, Spanish, Italian, German, some others. And they're very monarchical. They kind of respect the old oligarchy. There's the descendants of European settlers that kind of grow up in Venezuela and maybe have a little bit more heart for Venezuela than they do for back home. And then there's the indigenous people that are coming out of the tribes down there, and there's many different tribes, many different languages around there. And then you've also got the giant influx of African slaves that got brought over. So not only do you have to like make a new country that's made up of a bunch of different peoples who don't necessarily get along or have a shared culture, you have to do that with all of the outside pressure that could possibly corrupt your economy. And it's really not like hard to even think about when there's a lot of money coming in because you make cocoa and coffee, but your own people don't even really have enough money to consume it, and you make money off of it. And you're selling all this out. If you're the leaders, it's really easy for those outside people to offer you a ridiculous amount of money to sell out your own people. And you not really think about it like that because, for one, Venezuela never really had any money before. It was all colonial money. So this is all new. So any amount of tax money that's coming is cool. And this is sort of what we see when the oil starts coming out of the ground. And I think it's in 1915, let's call it, somewhere around there. American oil companies lead an expedition into some particular valley in Venezuela, and they find oil, and they find a lot of it, a lot of oil, and they find it pretty instantly. And at this time, Venezuela doesn't have the money, the technology. They don't have really universities that are producing people with the know-how to pull the oil out of the ground. And so at the time, the power calculation's easy. Yeah, let's let these American companies pull it out of the ground. We'll get a little bit of the profits. They'll do whatever they're going to do with it. Maybe they'll help us refine some, and we get some power out of the whole thing. And we really need power if we're going to industrialize. So this kind of marks the beginning of Venezuela's industrialization, is when that oil starts coming out of the ground, out of the ground, out of the ground. But it's a lot of money. By the time World War II comes around, I didn't know this. This actually shocked me. Venezuela was producing more oil than any other place on earth, about 500,000 barrels a day, which is a lot. It's a lot of oil. A lot of oil be coming out of one country. And at that time, and there's even some people that speculate that the Allies would have had a lot harder time fueling their victory or even winning if Venezuela wasn't producing that oil. Or if maybe like the Germans had got to them first, or if they had for some reason joined the Axis powers, it could have been very bad. Very, very bad. So Venezuela, in a big way, helps the Allies win the war because of all that oil coming out of the ground. And maybe they realize this. Maybe the money is just there making sense. Or maybe they get a leader in the early 50s that just actually gives a shit and isn't willing to sell out the country into the ground. What a novel idea. Or sell them under the river, under the bus. What is the phrase? But yeah, what a crazy thing, right? And he strikes a deal with the oil companies for a 50-50 split. And what that makes me think is that before, it was not a 50-50 split. That, the Venezuelans were probably, the leaders at least, were happy with beans because they just didn't understand how much money was actually coming out of there. But, we won the war. We're an industrializing country now. And that 50-50 split and America becoming a big global power and expanding the way we did and building all of the industry and the cars and everything, Venezuela got really, really rich from the early 50s to the late 60s, early 70s. That's when things get a little complex. But let's note what era we're in, the early 50s to the 60s. This is the Cold War. Yes, the Cold War, that weird time in which America is bending the rules on what it means to be the good guys that just won this war. Sometimes the means justify the ends, I guess. But this is that time. This is the time of the Bay of Pigs. This is the time of whacking presidents that say too much and want to do too much. This is the time of whacking presidents' brothers that say too much. You know what I mean? This is the time of whacking people that come out with a message of peace and love and no war, and why are the bankers sending all these children to die? This is that era. This is that era of shady shit going on, the CIA overstepping, and the CIA getting caught overstepping and having to pick more covert means of things. And just think about what that means power-wise. Venezuela's making this much oil. They're this close to us. We're making this much money off of them. They're kind of becoming rich, and if they become rich enough, man, they might not want to sell us all that oil. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Flesh Laser. Over 35% of men with penises experience erectile dysfunction, and over 95% of those without experience it. It's absolutely a tragedy in our dear United States. Over 75% of men with penises and erectile dysfunction also experience depression, and depression is kinda lame. Cut out the limp and cut out the sad with Flesh Laser. Most podcasters out there will try to sell you a pill for your little limpy. Pills? Pills? I don't know if you guys have heard, but RFK Jr. is in charge now, pussies. We're going with natural remedies found all around us in the world. Not synthesized by a lab. Yeah. Flesh Laser is a new product that looks like a flashlight, but has 666 alpha-2 scalar frequency emitters. When you turn it on, it looks just like regular old lasers, but these are very low and obscure frequencies of light that are only found on the event horizons of black holes and are only recently known to man and discovered from satellite telescopes. These frequencies are known to produce new material from nothing and harness the power of other dimensions to grow your organs and make them hard. This very natural therapy is up to 20 times safer than ED medication and is definitely something that will make Daddy RFK very, very happy. Thanks for sponsoring the show, and get Flesh Laser today at fleshlaser.us today. And they say if that website is shut down, then go to fleshlaser.rus today. All right, back to the show.
Warning, side effects may include shrinking of the male organs, permanent flaccidness, discoloration, rapid over-enlargement, blue-green illumination, and in some more rare cases, a complete disintegration of penis.
So we're starting to enter a time in which Venezuela represents a power center, and the US and Russia are kind of going at it. And there is at the time, a multipolar world forming. Multipolar as in power center over here in the Western Hemisphere, power centers over here in the Eastern. China's kind of a burgeoning one. We helped with that. And we're sort of in this situation. And, all right, this is arcane. This is hard to understand. So I'm going to try to break this down in the best way possible. If I can make a metaphor for you in the relationship between countries like the US, China, Russia, and countries like Venezuela, the best metaphor is that of one between a pimp and his hose. Hear me out. You're the new girl on the block. You got a lot going for you. You're curvy. You got some hills. You're full of resources, full of potential. Venezuela. And there's a couple big daddies driving around in their caddies. And they see young Venezuela over there looking so fine, looking like $1 million. But Big Pimpin' Daddy don't want a girlfriend. Big Pimpin' Daddy wants some hoes. And what do Big Pimpin' Daddies do to keep they hoes in line? This is all for the metaphor. Please don't consider this to be too disrespectful. I'm trying to communicate something tough and very hard. This is very important. So put your feelings aside. How do pimps control they hoes? There's a couple different ways. Mostly, it's a psychological thing. It's psychological warfare. To keep your hoes in line, you got to keep them desperate. You got to keep them needing you. You got to keep them thinking that they can't make it on their own, that life is dangerous without you, and that all of this money they're making is only because of you. And if I were to do it on my own, things would go so badly. So badly. And so if you want your hoes to be making money for you, you got to keep them needing you. But you got to keep them still kind of alive. But you want them hooked on crack. You want them alive. You want them to still be able to throw it back. You want them to still be looking good on the streets. You don't want them getting too skinny. You want to take care of them a little bit so they can keep making you money. But you don't want them thinking that they're the master of their own universe. What the fuck? No, that's going to hurt your bottom line. It's going to really hurt your bottom line if your hoes start thinking that they can be INDEPENDT. You know what that means. They can't be independent. They can't be thinking for themselves. And so if you're the big pimpin' daddies like Russia and China and America, you have a vested interest in keeping them hooked. And that's where this metaphor gets so beautiful, because this USAID, humanitarian assistance, it's going out to these people, is that very, very crack. And even at the very basic level, let's rule out that any of the money goes to places it shouldn't be. Let's rule out the fact that big lump sums go into the hands of leaders, and those leaders pay off other people to corrupt the whole system, and maybe some of that money and some of those supplies get to the people, but who fucking knows? Let's rule all of that corruption out, and let's just say that the United States government is sending humanitarian aid to these people. Now, on the surface, that sounds so great. It's so nice. It's such a nice thing to do. And it could have been maybe at one point. It could have started with some good intentions, but people very quickly figured out that humanitarian aid is crack to a burgeoning post-colonial export country like Venezuela. It is crack. Essentially, it kind of works like this. If you're America and Venezuela's your hoe, then you're getting all the sweet deals and you're not really allowing them to make deals with other people. So you've got a pretty good amount of power over them. And then you're giving them this humanitarian aid. But because you've got the power and leverage, you know what their books look like. You know how much money they're making. And you're not going to let them ever make so much money that they can do it on their own. That's what the humanitarian aid's for. And so they get hooked on the humanitarian aid. It artificially bolsters the economy. It artificially makes people there feel like their economy is stable enough. But the tricky folks over at the U.S. State Department,
Call 1-800-LASER-KNOB. It's the only doorknob that can't be robbed. We put lasers in a knob so the bad guys don't rob. If you don't want your knob stolen, here's some advice, my friend. Call 1-800-LASER-KNOB today.
From the makers of Flesh Laser and the people who definitely thought of the fleshlight first, but just never got around to monetizing it because gross, dude.
the aid, the humanitarian assistance, the artificially propping up of the economy is the point. Because the folks, the clever folks over there, probably with the CIA, probably with the deep state as it's known, probably with elements that aren't even completely loyal to America, but are kind of loyal to this new global government. Those clever people over there know that the aid is crack. Because if that government ever stops wanting to play ball or doesn't want to give you the oil for the right price, you just pull the rug out from under them. And what you're essentially saying is that, hey, we will make your people revolt against you, and they might shove a bayonet up your ass, Gaddafi style. You know, that's what happens when you want to make your own currency and get off of the oil dollar. It's not good. And that's what we say with the humanitarian aid. Okay, well, your economy's artificially propped up. If we pull the rug and pull out right now, fine, you do what you want, but those people are going to come for you, and you're probably going to end up eaten by crocodiles in the jungle at some point here soon. And those guys know that, or they knew that back in the day, so that was the leverage that this USAID had over them, right? And so it sounds like it could be a good thing. It sounds like it was at least some PR people tried to make it and market it and spin it to sound like something good, but it's ultimately this way that we keep people desperate and needing us and giving us their resources at the right price. It's the crack. It's the crack in the pipe that's going down that hoe throat. It's the crack in her veins that's making her scream at that Mexican dude running down the street. It's the crack in her veins that allows her to perform fellatio at such a phenomenal rate. And Big Pimpin' Daddy and the caddy got caddy payments to make. So we can't just stop letting the money flow. You see what I'm saying? It sounds like a good thing on the surface, but is it really? Because Venezuela's history is marred by a lot of ups and downs and coups and overthrows, and all kinds of stuff. And after talking to my Venezuelan friend, she loves America, which after doing all this research and then bringing it to her kind of puzzled me up front, but I started to piece it together. Because in the 60s or in the 50s and the 60s, there was a lot of money coming out and Venezuela was on a good track. They were very rich. They had a pretty balanced, peaceful system of government in which like three parties sort of shared power, and things were pretty good. Things were pretty good. And it could be that things were getting too good and America wanted to destabilize it. It could be that there was this caudillo culture of clientelism and kind of just wanting to pay people off for loyalties. It could be that they never really formed a constitution the same way we do. And the blame could be put on us that we didn't inoculate them for things like a communist, fascist-esque revolution in which all the wealth gets redistributed, and this Bolivarian revolution that Hugo Chavez and Maduro have claimed. It's for the people, and it's a populist movement, and this and that, and this and that. We didn't inoculate them for all of that. And so it's almost kind of on us. You know, it's like you roll the dice, you want your hose to be desperate, but just desperate enough to want to stick with you. But one day she might start thinking, she watches the wrong TikTok, she gets a little too like empowered, and she thinks that she can go do her own thing. And that's sort of what happened when Hugo Chavez took over in 97. He tried in 92, got jailed, made a really beautiful speech that inspired a lot of people, and then when he got out of jail, he won the election in 97. And then the whole cycle starts, and he was in power from 97 to 2013, and Maduro's been in power since. 27 years of ruling between two people, and there's supposed to have been it's supposed to be kind of democratic down there. So part of me wants to blame America, but also I start thinking about this thing, and I've learned this from relationships. You can't change other people. You can maybe at best inspire someone else to change, but even if your intention in wanting change is not good, then it just feels all wrong, right? And so at a base metaphysical soul level, we could never have pushed the constitution that we have on a place like Venezuela. It's something that they would have to want and fight for and get themselves. And it sucks to say, but their independence was in 1811, 1823. This is, 30, 40 years after American independence and after we have our Bill of Rights and after kind of the experiment looks like it might be maybe working. We did have the revolution. We fought them again in 1812, fucked them up. We fought the French. We fought the Spanish at this point. We're doing okay. We hadn't fought the Spanish by that point. Maybe a little bit. Maybe the Mexicans a little bit more. But we'd had a few wars. America's doing okay, and it's spreading. And I don't know. Who knows at the time why it doesn't make sense to adopt a constitution like that, but that would have certainly inoculated them for it down the road. But it still puzzled me how my friend still loves America and doesn't see America as this entirely evil thing. And so, I don't know, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, what is the angle there? How is it? Could it be that even though we are a big pimpin' daddy in the caddy, that there are other worse pimps out there? It could be the case that we are the kind of pimp that buys our hoes a Gucci bag every now and then. Sends her to a spa day. Gets her some Uber Eats while she's out there, Who knows? It could be that we treat our hoes a little bit better than, let's say, Russia or China. Because since the American influence and USAID programs and European Western influence in general was sort of ousted from Venezuela, things haven't got better there. But things have shifted power-wise. It's now China, maybe Russia to a smaller degree, but mostly China that's getting the sweet energy deals. They're pulling the oil out of the ground. They're getting them minerals. China's doing that now. But for some reason, the people of Venezuela are still poor. Like really, really poor. Like poor and starving. Like poor to the point where there's no hope. Like, poor to the point where it's not that you're not even making enough money. There's no place to go make money. It's desolate. It's desolate. And the cops don't do anything. It's entirely corrupt. You can get robbed in Venezuela right in front of the cops, and the cops will say, that's your problem. You shouldn't have been doing whatever you were doing. Because the cops there are not meant to protect the people. The cops there are armed thugs that are protecting the very unpopular Maduro from the people. They're there to keep the people in line, to keep people desperate and afraid. And if you don't have any faith in calling the cops, you don't have any faith in the government protecting you or your property, you live in a faithless place. And a faithless place is very, very easy to control. And maybe just from a 1,000-foot view, it could be that if you're going to have a big world power sort of make you a vassal state and turn you into one of they hoes, if it's going to happen anyway, you might want the pimp that's going to treat you better. I'm not saying this is I'm not saying this is ideal. I'm not saying that the world should be a pimp and hoe relationship. I'm saying it is what it is. And I'm saying if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And it doesn't necessarily make it right, but it does make the Venezuelan people more hungry. More hungry. I'm not saying that we should feel great about exploiting other people and making sure it benefits us first. But maybe there's a fair oil deal to strike. I don't know. Maybe there is a fair deal to strike. Maybe we could be better pimps, you know? Maybe we could maybe even not be pimps. I don't know. Maybe there's a different future, but it doesn't seem like China has any interest or incentive or need to. And this is the funny thing about America, and this is why I have so much hope. Sounds weird, but I have hope because they have to lie to us. I have so much hope because they have to go way out of their way and spend millions of dollars buying off media, buying off personalities to make sure we're convinced that they're not perpetrating the evil that they are perpetrating. I don't think China has that same problem. I think the people there just know not to ask questions, and they don't have like a consciousness revolution when they find out about how American money is being spent to blow up kids. And like, we have that visceral reaction. If people really knew firsthand, if they saw a video of what USAID and they could make the 1 + 1 = 2 sort of thing in their head, they would be like, well, this is wrong. And we'd be writing our congressmen, we'd be putting all kinds of pressure, there'd be protests. But we're protesting and talking about all this other bullshit that's not even really real and not the stuff that really matters. But still, there's that potential for us to get pissed about something because we at least have like a collective guilt about things. And if we're being honest and statist and just talking about empire building, we're kind of at a disadvantage. If you're really going to compete in a cutthroat business place, you can't be leading heart first into this whole thing. But who am I to say? I have a bleeding heart. I will choose to do what I think to be the right thing before the money. So I'm not the best person to ask about this. But it could be that we're better pimps. And it could be that because we didn't treat Venezuela good enough that they went and chose an even worse pimp daddy, and they getting smacked up every day. They're getting sold out. They don't get any Gucci bags, no spa days, nothing like that. It's just hoe business, and it's not good. And the people of Venezuela are very desperate right now. And it seems like even the guy who's in power, Nicolas Maduro, lost an election and refused to abdicate. Now, who knows? He says the election was stolen. It's so murky and it's so nuanced, and to say that there's any clear-cut good and evil in this whole thing is just entirely wild. But to also say that we don't need to audit all this fucking money that's going to these crazy places, and we shouldn't at least know where it's going, and we shouldn't at least know why we're spending it, that's crazy. That is evil when somebody tells you that you don't need to know or don't need to care or ignore it. That's evil. I don't know that I can put into a box all of what's going on because America did perpetrate some evil. There was a lot of greed involved. All of this is true. There's a lot of greed involved in the government of Venezuela. Those people are just as corruptible as American people. We're all people. And if you wave enough money in somebody's face, if you wave some 1865 coffee trade money, that's a lot of money at the time. Coffee's like, woo, big old thing. Coffee's winning the West at this point. Cowboys can't do their job without coffee. Coffee's important. If you wave some coffee money in somebody's face, And they're second generation European colonists, third generation maybe. And you've got some loyalty to Venezuela, but you've got more more loyalty to money. Why not take that money? Why not sell people out? It's not even really like or really have much in common with the rest of Venezuela at the time in 1860, 1870. So somebody comes and waves some money in your face and you're just as corruptible. And it wasn't just America doing this. It was Britain, it was Spain, it was France. Everybody's waving money in everybody's face, trying to exploit everybody. And the whole Western world, at least, a lot less so in the East, the whole Western world is having this like Christian coming to Jesus moment about how bad colonization is. So, we did do it the best and the most efficiently, which probably ended up Western colonization was pretty effective, which isn't a good thing. It has a high body count, high exploitation levels. But Western culture also did end all that practice. You see what I'm saying? There's so much gray area here. And I'm not saying that we need to keep funding Venezuela. I'm not saying that we need to pull it. I don't really know. I just want you to understand how sticky the situation is and how much money is getting funneled out of your paycheck into other places for things like Iraqi Sesame Street. What to do? Crazy world. We're living in crazy world. I guess what we have to do here is do a little balancing of the head and the heart, the idealism and the realism of power vacuums and money and how things work in the world. And we can be really idealistic and say America's this big evil empire and we got to stop. But if we stop right now all at once, it's not going to be good for you and me. The reason that you and I can communicate in this way, the reason I can sit here drinking a coffee from the store with this microphone that was made very cheaply for me, the reason I can have a car and go out and drive and go to dinner, the reason some of these people can make a living doing nonsense, bullshit, fake jobs, the reason you can get on TikTok and hear some bullshit and then also complain about your government on a daily basis, and the reason you can make $45,000 a year and eat yourself to death is because of the American empire. It's because of cheap oil. It's because of cheap energy and the deals that we've made abroad. And I hear you. I hear your heart wanting to say, we need to stop this. It's so evil. Okay, maybe. You might be right. I might be down. It'd be a long camping trip, but I mean, there's going to be another humanitarian crisis here when our economy goes kaput and there's lots of people here that can't stay cool or warm or keep food in their bellies. You know what I mean? And it sucks to think that way. That it's either abuse somebody else or be abused yourself. And it probably isn't all the way like that, but it is all the way like that if you make instantaneous changes, If you're the kind of person that would say, if I had a genie, I would wave the wand and we'd stop this American empire building altogether. Yeah, well, your car is going to become a yard ornament. Your job is going to become a thing of the past that people laugh at because it doesn't produce anything real. Having a job in which you ensure the diversity, equity, and inclusion of your giant office isn't a real job. It doesn't produce anything. And you won't be able to do that in a world where people are actually desperate and have to do something productive to survive. Maybe we can avoid that. Maybe we can avoid this altogether. But Venezuelan history is just so interesting. And I think it gives a really good example of the U.S. aid and what that means and what it does. You've got the Cold War period. You've got all the money we sent in to topple. You've got the rug of the aid that we can pull out from under people at any point. And if you don't believe the United States would do this, I guess this is maybe just a little cherry on top detail. Well, think about it this way. Things started going south diplomatically with the United States after Venezuela joined OPEC, after they joined Saudi Arabia, Libya, Kuwait, all those other oil-producing countries in order to help stabilize themselves. They eventually lowered the prices to a point to where a lot of them destabilized. I'm not too sure about how OPEC works, but Venezuela at many points has tried to break away and get a better deal, and then things go very badly for them. Then there's a military overthrow. There's some civil war. There's some coups. Just go and look at the history. It's really, really interesting. It's full of up and downs. You don't have to trust me completely on it, but I promise you that to the best of my knowledge, I'm giving an accurate description. And, it's the truth when it's hard to swallow. It is. So, I don't know. Pimpin' ain't easy. It just ain't. Pimpin' ain't easy. And Pimpin's kind of like that ring, that powerful ring. Do we throw it in the mountain, to the lava? Do you put it on? Do you wear it on a little chain around your neck? Who knows? There's probably a variety of options, but I hope this helped. I hope you maybe understand a little bit more about the USAID program, what its true purposes are, what its true purposes are not, how much gray area there is, and how much mystery there is, and how important it is for us to try to piece this shit together and demand the truth. So, and the more truth we get, the more fun metaphors of pimps and hoes I'll get to make for you. And crack. We love crack, and we love pimps, and we love hoes. So, stay beautiful. Till next time. Love you guys. Bye.